So this isn't working out quite the way we expected it to for a team that had it rolling, man. How you doing, Lance?
I'm doing well on this Sunday.
Yeah.
Timberwolves aren't, but I am.
Well, there's the glass half full and there's the glass half empty, and then there's the fact that there's water in the glass. So
Right.
I guess the glass half full is the Timberwolves are still in the top 2 seed in the West. We haven't quite made it to the All-Star break, and I think that if at the beginning of the season you said that here we stand on January 28th, the Minnesota Timberwolves would be the number 2 team in the West. If you said that back in October, people would have been ecstatic. Glass half full. Glass half empty, they are showing all kinds of warts and have absolutely shit the bed since really the new year, since the start of the new year. And now they're starting to add the dreaded losing to the bad teams to a cocktail of stumbling, bumbling, fumbling, as Chris Berman used to say on SportsCenter, over their own basketball feet. And that's glass half empty. It's not looking good right now. The fact that there's water in the glass is the fact that, there's a lot of positives that this team has shown what they're capable of. There's a lot of games to go, starting with a big one tomorrow night at Oklahoma City, in which if they can rediscover who they are, or maybe improve on who they've been on offense and rediscover who they are for 4 quarters, not just 3 quarters on defense, or I even venture to say 2 quarters, because their first quarters haven't been great and their fourth quarters speak for themselves. They're right back in first place again. So there's water in the glass. Maybe we just got a drink. It might taste like, Minnetonka tap water, which is why everybody in the city buys water in some way, fashion, or form. But we're not going to die of thirst. I don't know what. You are the Coach of the Culture podcast. Thank you for joining us. I am Coach Frank, and I'm joined, of course, as always, by none other than my son, Lance Gardner, proprietor of Yes and owner of Yes Trees. And welcome back, man. Glad to have you back.
Yeah, I listened to it last week, and you held it down. You definitely held it down. But yeah, I'm glad to be back. I look forward to doing this. And there's a lot to talk about over the last 4 days. And so I'm excited to do that. And I hope that, like you said, we can find a way to get back to that glass half full. Because it's there's definitely some glaring things that have been going on with the Wolves, and Chris Finch also has his hands full right now because there's a lot going on, and if he's as good as the coach as we have explained before and talked about, he's going to find a way to figure out what they're doing, and put them in the positions to be successful, because we've noticed that they're very young and immature, especially with Mike Conley off the floor. So I think Chris Finch is going to have to come in and kind of rein back some people, I think, and get some more organization and structure, especially late game.
Oh, there's that word again. Oh man, you put that word out there, I'm gonna have people throwing darts at me on my Twitter feed, because and you know what? I feel like we are the announcer's jinx right now, because soon as we did a podcast episode talking about how well Jaden McDaniels was played, then he basically crapped all over himself for a whole 2 weeks, and then we had to come back and make a episode, talking about, man, Jaden for better, for worse. And as soon as, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, we do a whole episode, defending Chris Finch. I don't do this often, man, but he hasn't exactly helped himself either during this stretch, at least last week. And I think we're going to have to get to that, especially as we roll into getting into the latest loss against the Spurs, where I just feel like Chris Finch, he's got to take some ownership and some responsibility himself for how that game unfolded. And I'm not one who likes to criticize coaches often, but he had me scratching my head with some decisions in the fourth quarter of that game, especially to start the fourth quarter. And then, the players also didn't help themselves. I'm going to point out a play as we talk about this later in the podcast, foreshadowing again. I love to do that, where, people clamoring for him to call more set plays. Well, I'm going to point out a play in that San Antonio loss where he absolutely called a set play, and Anthony Edwards just made a really foolish and immature play with the ball after the play was called for him. And, for those of you who feel like Anthony Edwards is bulletproof, you're probably not going to like this podcast very much, because he's going to take some darts in this podcast, as there is enough blame to go around when, you lose to, what'd you say, the second worst team in the East, the third worst team in the East, and the third worst team in the West, or whatever. You struggle with the third worst team in the East, and you lose to the second worst team in the East, and you lose to, what was it, the second? San Antonio's the second worst team in the West, you said?
San Antonio's the worst in the West. They what was it they beat by 2?
Brooklyn,
yeah. Brooklyn is fighting for playoff contention. So none of these games,
playoff contention or play in, like 12, 11.
They're the 10 seed, 18 and 27, not a good team. No. The whole point of what I was saying with that is just they have not had a single decisive win over any of these bottom of the league teams in the last 4 games, and 2 of which they actually ended up losing.
It was a bad week. It was a bad week, and let's start from the beginning and talk about it. And it's funny. I feel like the last 2 weeks, the whole show has been concerning trends.
Yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of hope it never ends.
Yeah, the hope it never ends has been a little rough. So let's go back to last Monday, home loss against the Charlotte Hornets, a game in which you get outscored 36-18 in the fourth quarter by a team that I believe or at the time was 7th worst in the league in offensive efficiency. And you gave up 3 30-plus point quarters, including that 36 in the fourth. And the one quarter you didn't give up 30 points. Now, this is at home, where the Timberwolves have been really good on defense. In the one quarter you didn't give up 30 points, you gave up 28 points. And, of course, this is the game where Karl Anthony Towns has 44 points in the first half, has another 14 points in the third quarter, and then scores 4 points the entire fourth quarter. Chris Finch comes out, blasts the team in the media for just, I believe he called it a disgusting display of defense, and I don't think anybody who watched the game can deny that. And we live in this society, man, and we see it at the high school level. I saw a lot more Karl Anthony Towns scores 62 points statements and graphics and memes on Facebook and Twitter than I saw graphics that say the Timberwolves get outscored by 18 points in the fourth quarter and blow a double-digit lead and lose to one of the worst teams in the league. And that's the society we live in. And the funny thing is, in an era of basketball where scoring is at an all-time high, so what? Scored 62 points. Like, that's not even a big deal anymore. I think there's 3 players that scored 60 points last week alone, if not 4. 4 players.
Yeah. I did see, if you're knowing what you're looking for and you're not just seeing 62 points and you're actually listening to even a snippet, and most people were talking about the fact that it happened in the loss.
From a national,
right.
From a national meme and NBA.com and all that stuff, right. The loss was like an afterthought,
Right. And one thing on this real quick, and we're probably going to say it 25 times in this podcast, but immaturity played a part in that. And I personally, one of the times where I've I do hold Chris Finch responsible and accountable for these is like, if I'm coaching the Wolves in that situation, like I I rarely see Chris Finch get really loud or adamant with the players. He's very even keeled. But that's a time where mid game, like I'm losing it. Like I'm literally looking at all of my players, whether that's loud, but I just feel like in that moment as a coach, you would have so much passion that you don't even really have the ability to hold that in. But I'm looking at my players and I'm like, are you guys serious? Like, is this, you can't be serious right now. Like, Kat, you can't be out here right now in the fourth quarter driving through double teams. Like I would have lost my mind, and I didn't see that out of Chris Finch. And that's where our podcast, or I just said structure, that's a moment where you have to control your team. You have to shut all that noise down. You have to shut all that down and tell them, look, it don't matter. None of this matters if we lose this game. If we trick this game off, none of this matters. We need to get this in order. And I don't see that in Chris Finch. I don't see when he gets animated and and in that sense. And it was actually like disgusting, like he said, and everyone else has said, to watch. And if you want a comparison, and I said off podcast that the Timberwolves are a long ways away from the maturity it's going to take to win a championship. If you go watch Luka's 70-piece or 73-piece,
right,
in the last 8 minutes of that game,
right,
he didn't look for his shot not one time.
Right.
He didn't force nothing other than passes to his open teammates because they were now sending doubles and triple teams at him. And look what happened. He still scored another 8 points without even trying to score.
Right.
And he finished out the game for them, and they took home the W. And that was an exact opposite. If you go watch the last 10 minutes of the fourth quarter, go watch the whole fourth quarter of the Wolves game, and then go watch the fourth quarter of the Mavericks game, and you will see the exact glaring difference in why these Timberwolves mentally and mature-wise are so far away, especially with Mike Conley not being on the floor.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying in terms of, as a coach, I always say that, unless you're Tom Thibodeau and your demeanor is just loud and gruff all the time, when you're a mild-mannered coach like Chris Finch, you get, I think, 3 out-of-character, go ballistic speeches a season, right? Because if you do it all the time, then it becomes background noise. It becomes white noise after a while. But that Charlotte game, I will say, I think would have been a good time for, Valley Sports North to come out of a timeout and Jim Peterson to say, man, Chris Finch just lit into his team in a way that I have not heard or seen Chris Finch light into his team on the sidelines very often in all the years that I've been brought in, 3 years that he's been here. Chris Finch is not happy. He absolutely, you could hear him, you could see him, like that would have been one of them times where I think that would have been warranted. And I would have loved to hear Jim Peterson, be able to say that, because that would have happened. Like I said, you get about 3 per year. You get about 3 go ballistics per year. And, he's been dropping the hits and dropping the signs. And I got a sneaking suspicion he does light into them behind the scenes, in the locker room, in practices. But when you're at home and, at some time in that fourth quarter, as that lead started to dwindle down and these dudes are putting up a 36 piece on the way to putting up a 36 piece on you, and their confidence is to the point where, yeah, Charlotte made some ridiculous shots in that fourth quarter. But if you let NBA players feel good about their shot, they're going to make ridiculous shots. Every player in the NBA is capable of walking into a summer league gym and going for 50, right? Yeah. And so, I agree with you. That would have been a good time for Chris Finch to have an out-of-character moment and go ballistic and still have 2 more in his back pocket, for the stretch run.
And as a coach, I'm sure you can, my mindset when to use those three blow-ups. When there is no play that you can draw up, when
Right.
there is no defense that you can set up,
Right.
when there is no schematic plan that you can make or do to alter what is about to happen. It is strictly your energy, your intensity, your attitude
focus.
towards the game, your respect level, your determination, all of those things. That's when that's when those moments occur.
Yep.
Right. And I think that that's one of those times where I was like, you agreed with it. And I'm getting flustered just talking about it because I don't know how I could have possibly, not thrown the clipboard. I don't know how I couldn't have there ain't nothing basketball terminology coming out of my mouth for the next 35 seconds. And y'all understand why. So go out there and figure it out. And yeah, it just didn't happen.
Yeah, no, and he, he said after the game, he said, there was no focus on ball pressure. They just were playing. They weren't playing. And here's the thing about, in the NBA, you have to play to win. You can't play just to be playing basketball. No matter who the opponent is, you have to play to win the game. Because if you're playing just to play basketball, and Anthony Edwards talked about how he got caught up in the Cat, he was trying to see Cat score 100 and this, that, and the other thing. And you said it going all the way back to the Atlanta second half. This team goes as Ant goes in terms of focus, intensity, preparation, being dialed in. And that doesn't always mean scoring. It means attitude. And it's no wonder they give up 128 points to one of the worst offensive teams in the league and give up 36 points in the fourth quarter if Ant's attitude is not focused on winning the game, but focused on, how many points can Cat get, taking an assumption. And I said it a couple of weeks ago, when you assume you make I said it last week on the podcast, when you assume you make an ass out of you and me. And if you're assuming a win in any competitive sports, you're bound to get what they got, and so that kind of, and it wasn't even that started a trend, because there's been a trend. There's been a trend. The Pistons win, the Grizzlies win, the Thunder lost, the Trailblazers win. Yeah, they won big, but they needed a big fourth quarter to put them away. There's been a trend.
Real quick, I want to add something before we get too far. You were saying how I had mentioned earlier, Anthony Edwards, the team goes as far as he goes. He got caught up in the moment, focusing on Cats 100, whatever. I feel like the team has lost that sense of we go where Ant goes mentality, because he has not been the consistent leader that this team needs. And so now the door is open, which is why I have seen a lot of Ant and Cat, you go, I go, you go, I go. But now it's not even, now it's the leadership that's in question. Before we were saying, it's Ant's team, right? Now I feel like they've played themselves back into a situation, or Ant has allowed the team to get back into a situation where now they can't look at Ant to be that leader day in and day out. They can't, they're searching for someone to be that. And Mike Conley not being on the floor has shown that they don't have any leadership right now. And they don't look at Ant as that leader anymore. They might look at him as a firecracker scorer who can go off, but when it comes to the leadership qualities, they are searching for that right now.
Well, I would say that piss poor shot selection and a bunch of bad fourth quarter turnovers consecutively through a series of games will definitely crack that armor of, oh yeah, this is the guy that we follow. And I think we're going to get to that as we move through the games this week. And that's a really great point to bring up, because you start to see more and more of that. And I also think, and this is just, obviously we're all speculative and opinion based, but I feel like Ant is struggling with how to manage games. And I feel like Chris Finch understanding that if we're going to win in the playoffs, Ant's got to learn how to manage games. And I feel like, and manage games to win. And yes, Mike Conley hasn't played in 3 of these games in the last week. He only played in the Brooklyn game, I believe, the only played in. He didn't play in the Hornets game. He didn't play in the Wizards game on the front end of the back-to-back. And he didn't play in the Spurs game. And so, who's got the ball in their hands in the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's something to be said there for who, and Nikhil is initiating some offense. And actually, I feel like when Nikhil has initiated offense, for the most part, offense hasn't been horrible, but there's a lack of sense of urgency in getting into things. And again, we're going to talk more about this as we kind of encapsulate all of this when we get to the Spurs game from last night. But I think you bring up a really good point in Ant's indecisiveness. Anthony Edwards' indecisiveness is creating a ripple of indecisiveness throughout the team, especially in the fourth quarters. And, I've said all along, Anthony Edwards needs to be one of the top players in the league at closing time, field goal percentage, scoring points, getting assists, manipulating the fourth quarter of games, a la De'Aaron Fox, and this is part of the growth curve of a 22-year-old who's never been in these situations and never won high leverage basketball at any level. He hasn't won a playoff series. They didn't win a medal this summer. He, for all of his gifts and talents, hasn't learned how to lead a team to high level winning ever. And that is a skill, and it's also what happened.
He hasn't even been, this is not, we're not just talking about the Hornets game anymore. We're talking about in general, but he hasn't even been average for what we're expecting of him and what he's capable of. His fourth quarters and his decision making and his turnovers have been below average. They have not been good.
And it's been because teams are attacking his processing speed. They're attacking his lack of desire to get rid of the ball and then trust the offense or do the off the ball work to go get it. And then, like I said, I don't want to keep getting ahead to the Spurs game, but we'll let's move on to the Wizards and Nets, and then we'll get to the Spurs. And I think everything that we're saying kind of comes to a head in the fourth quarter of that Spurs game.
So they beat the Wizards 118-107. It was a win. Cat went for 27 and went for 38. The team only shot 28% from the field, or from the three, 42% from the field. It wasn't a very good win, but they were playing the Wizards, one of those teams that we talked about, and the Wizards had, I think, 20 turnovers.
At 21 turnovers, the Wolves' defensive intensity wasn't bad. You would like to think that if a team scores 21 turnovers, you're going to score more than 118 points. But nonetheless,
but it wasn't a decisive. It wasn't. This is the team first team in the West versus the third team in the East. We should beat them by 25 points. Have our starters sitting on the bench at the end of the game. Those type of things that we got accustomed to, and most first place teams are doing on a regular basis. I mean, you're seeing Giannis over there, and him and his brother's going to play in the last 5 minutes of every game, and every other day he's doing something, and they're having a grand old time. And now you got Timberwolves over here scrapping to hold on in the fourth quarter against the Wizards.
Yeah, I mean, sense of urgency. One thing championship teams understand, Milwaukee, Giannis has won a title, so he understands what sense of urgency looks like. And, this is a game against the Wizards. Yeah, the Wizards, they commit 21 turnovers. They gave up 15 offensive rebounds. The Wolves only committed 7 turnovers in that game, and you win by 11. Ant goes 11 for 28. Cat goes 11 for 24. Not usual Cat efficiency, but, not horrible. Ant, gets to the foul line 14 times, so his efficiency doesn't look that bad when you consider 38 points on 28 shots. You get 13 or 14 from the foul line, so he was clearly aggressive. 3 for 10 from 3, so, 30%'s what you would call an off night, but not a horrible night.
So they find a way to get the W against a bad team, but it's not a good win. It's another. It's just a bad
one
team.
Good quarter. They played one good quarter against the Wizards, and that's what it amounts to. They played one solid quarter. And, they won the first quarter by 6. They gave up 24 points. They lost the second quarter by 8. They lost the fourth quarter by 1. They had one good quarter against the Wizards, and that was enough to get the job done against a team that was determined to just turn the ball back over to them every time the Wolves didn't finish, right? And so then you go and you play at Brooklyn, and that was actually the game when we talked last week or 2 weeks ago, and I talked about it last week. That was the game that I was worried about because Spencer Dinwiddie always seems to kill the Wolves. Mikal Bridges, always seems to kill the Wolves. Dinwiddie had a pedestrian game, 14, but he was big in the fourth quarter. Cam Thomas was on a heater, and that's what happens when you let guys get going. He came in the game and got some good clean looks early, and if you let Cam Thomas see the ball go through the basket, he's hard to stop. He's going to be hard to stop when you let him see the ball go through the basket. And, of course, Mikal Bridges, inefficient, 21 on 18 shots. And, you win by 2. You only score 96 points. And you start looking at, well, why did you only score 96 points? You have 14 turnovers, a lot of them in the fourth. I can't remember exactly offhand how many fourth quarter turnovers they had, but I believe out of their 14 turnovers, at least 4 of them, if not more, were in the fourth quarter. And that's, you go into the quarter with a nice lead and you have to hold on for dear life because you score 15 points in the quarter. You only score 20. You score 36 points in the second half against the Brooklyn Nets.
Yep.
36 points in the second half. You score 60 in the first half and you score 36 points. It was all defense all the time. Their defense literally saved them in that game. Literally saved them. And that's just not a good look. It's not efficient. It's
holding on for, you said it best. They held on for dear life.
Cat was very efficient. And again, inefficient, 8 of 23. So
if you look at Ant was actually the only inefficient person on the team. Everyone else shot the ball really well. Nas Reed 2 for 7, whatever. But and Ant was the only one that shot well under 50%.
And going into the end of the third quarter, he was playing extremely well, and that's why they had the lead that they had. And then he misses 7 straight shots to end the third quarter. And to me, the problem isn't Ant missing 7 straight shots. The problem is I don't remember any of the 7 that wasn't either in isolation or off the dribble. Maybe one catch and shoot, but I don't remember any of the 7 where the ball moved, where guys were cutting and moving and screening. And, he just
doesn't happen.
He just decided he was going to not pass the ball. And it's like he missed 1 and then he missed 2 and then he missed 3. And then it became, I got to get something to go versus how can we as a team get something to go? And let me tell you, as somebody who coaches a kid who in a lot of ways reminds me of Anthony Edwards when it comes to his mentality about how offense should happen. What I think Gino Auriemma called it the go to hell offense, where he said, give me the ball and everybody else go to hell. It's like, we had a play in our game yesterday where coach calls a play from the sideline and, our star player, who much like Ant, for as bad as he was on this particular possession, he makes 2 free throws with 2 seconds left. He's hit game winners on back-to-back nights, right? And so coach calls a play and he looks dead at Coach O, looks him straight in the face, and then dribbles into a pull-up 3. It's just like, for those of you who don't coach and get like, Finch needs to do this and Finch needs to do that, it is really, really, really difficult to coach a supremely talented, supremely confident player and find that balance between this player is going to drive me crazy, but we also don't know if we can win if we don't, our chances of winning if we pull him go down exponentially. Like the balance of that, and what makes a great player is that they feel like every shot they're going to take is going in. And then, so having to live with some of their decision making as a coach is agonizing at times. I mean, it really, really is. It puts you in a box as a coach, and that's why Greg Popovich, has so much respect for that Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili. If Manu Ginobili was the best player on that San Antonio team, they would have won all the championships. But because Tim Duncan could check Manu Ginobili, that's why they could win those championships.
That's exactly what I was about to say real quick. Is it is on the coach, and I said it earlier. I think that he needs to pull the reins and reel these reins in a little bit with what's going on out there. But it also comes down to players holding each other accountable too, because they're in the trenches with you. They're the ones that are on the court with you. They're the ones that are affected, every single play by what it is that you're doing. And I know Mike Conley hasn't even been able to play lately, but Ant said that. Him and Kyle Anderson are both those two people that'll get on you. But that,
but those players aren't Hall of Famers. Tim Duncan is Hall of Fame. So
no, I
Tim Duncan says this is what we're going to do to Manu Ginobili. Mm-hmm. There's a certain level of respect and cred there that Cat can't tell Ant that, because Cat half the time doesn't make much better decisions, even when he's on a roll. Because how do you?
And that,
go ahead.
That's why that's why I was saying that leadership. What you're saying was Tim Duncan. That was him,
right?
Anthony Edwards to start the year had that. Anthony Edwards he was making better decisions. He was being the alpha male. He was being aggressive. He was doing all the things that they needed of him. And now it seems like because there's a little shake, Anthony Edwards doesn't know how to handle it. And him and Cat seem to be going back and forth trying to get that leadership role, because I think Cat is also trying to still dominate himself as that alpha male and still be the leader.
I saw something on Facebook. I don't know if it's, you can't believe everything you see on Facebook. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I haven't done the research. But in theory, it makes a lot of sense. And it was a quote, which again, I don't know, because sometimes Facebook be putting quotes up, people creating stuff that's not true. But basically, it spoke to Anthony Edwards saying that he wishes he had a mentor like Kobe Bryant. And that makes sense. If Anthony Edwards and Kobe had to go through it, right? He had to go through it. And people might think, well, is that really somebody great to look at as a mentor? But I tell you what, that those back-to-back championships with Paul Gasol and Andrew Bynum, who never did a thing in the league pretty much after he left the Lakers, and that group, that was Kobe Bryant leadership and mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is where that Ant-Cat dynamic. And to Cat's defense, he didn't have that except for the 1 year of Kevin Garnett. I think that, if Flip doesn't pass away and Kevin Garnett comes back and plays another year, I think that would have expedited Cat's basketball maturity, mindset, growth process, winning process exponentially, right? And so what you're looking at is a team that does not have that guy that can do it vocally and do it in terms of go 25 and 10 the right way. You know what I'm saying? Within the scheme that can say to Ant, bruh, that ain't it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we're talking about a 22-year-old. So, look, I'm 50 and I still need mentorship. So we're talking about a 22-year-old who absolutely, he's being mentored, I think, collectively by Mike, by Kyle, by Finch, by some of the assistant coaches. But right now they have a bullseye. When you're 1-2 in the West, the bad teams are trying to build confidence off of you, and the good teams are coming at you and treating you like you're a top seed. And they have never been in this position, any of them. And that goes back to that lack of sense of urgency that we're going to talk about when it comes down to these fourth quarters.
Yeah, and I think that Ant, had now most one seeds don't get that mentor, or not one seeds. First overall draft picks don't get that mentor because they're going to a bad team. So yeah, I'm sure all of them wish that they had a Kobe Bryant mentor. But I would say that Anthony Edwards has the willingness to be coached, the willingness to listen to somebody else. I absolutely think that he has that, because you can see in his gameplay that it alters, it shifts, right? He's trying to get Cat involved. He's trying to fit the system. He's trying to do these things, but it just seems like everything around him is just so up and down on top of his own mentality. Like he is the number one player that's talking about face the NBA on the number one team in the West, now the number 2 seed. And he has a lot to deal with right now. Like he's just having Cat on his team alone creates an entire dynamic that is extremely difficult to handle, right? You have a superstar player who, as we've talked about, doesn't want to just shoot threes. He doesn't want to come off the ball. He wants to be involved in the offense. He wants to score points. He wants to dominate. You, as Anthony Edwards, a lot of times, 22-year-old 1 overall draft doesn't have to deal with that, and they are the team. They do whatever they want, right? But Anthony Edwards has a veteran point guard, an all-star tandem
centers and power forward
center, and Rudy and Cat, and then he has Jaden McDaniels, who he's trying to bring up under his wing. Like, this man has so much going on in a day-to-day process, and I can tell that he's trying. He's trying to figure out how to please everybody, and sometimes, because he's as good as he is, he just decides, you know what, I don't care what none of y'all say. I'm going to do what I'm going to do and just deal with it, in a sense.
And that's coming from not ever winning on a high level. Because when you win on a high level, it's because you have really good players around you. You know, you don't win on a high level by yourself in basketball. You know, high school, college, or pro, right? And so, and when, you know, for them to get where they want to get to, they have to be able to put the ball in his hands at the end of games and run the right sets. I'm a firm believer in, if he can figure out with efficiency the pick and roll game with Rudy Gobert, how to make those passes that Luka Doncic makes, how to make those passes that LeBron makes in screen game, how to make your teammates better in that way and manipulate the defense consistently. You know, that's the key that unlocks the end of the fourth quarter problems and playoff. You're going really far. You know, you can't count on Mike Conley to carry them there. It's not his job. It's his job to guide. It's his job to guide, right? He's your power steering, right? But Ant is the engine that has to get it there. And I just think his inability to be really efficient and effective in fourth quarters in screen and roll game with Rudy and screen game with Cat, where you see these other teams, and maybe, you know, I don't know, I'm not in their practices. Maybe this is also a function of Chris Finch not, you know, coming into the season determined to be a high screen and roll, you know, a high PNR team, you know, and when you don't get a lot of practices during an NBA season. But, you know, you see these teams, what do they go to at the end of games, and what do they go to in fourth quarters? You know, what did the Spurs go to? They went to Trey Jones and Wemby time and time again. They went to the same play time and time again. You know, or Vassell with off action coming off of Wemby. Like, they use Wemby as a screener, a pick and popper, a pick and roller, you know, but they pretty much went to the same play over and over and over and over again. That's the one thing I will say, bringing up that word structure again, you know, it just doesn't seem like the Wolves have that one play that they're going to go to over and over and over and over and over again in the fourth quarter. And maybe that'll come as Mike Conley comes back for the stretch run, because I think it's good that they're going through this now, that Mike Conley's getting these games off now because they need him for the last 20 games of the regular season and into the playoffs. And, maybe it's going to be a lot of Mike and Rudy screen and roll with Ant on the weak side action and Cat in the strong side corner. I don't know. Maybe that's what it's going to be. But I just think that the inability to go heavy dose of PNR game with Ant and Rudy and that bear fruit, whether it's Ant going behind the screen for the three and being consistent making that shot, or Ant, getting people on his back and getting into the paint for the pull-up game or the lob game to Rudy, or Ant being able to make the late pass and make it a pass that Rudy can see and catch. Because all of them, I still don't understand why they throw the late no-look pass, bullet pass to Rudy. He's not catching that pass for a couple reasons. One, by the time he gets that deep in the lane, he's setting up for rebounding in position, so his head's up and his hands are up trying to set up for a rebound, and then you throw him a no-look last-second bullet pass and expect him to catch that. Like, those are the decisions that, how many times is that going to lead into a turnover before Nikhil, Cat, Ant, Kyle, stop doing that shit. That's just common sense. Stop doing that shit. Rudy, by the time Rudy gets to that late spot, he's looking for you to shoot the ball so he can get a rebound. But anyway, I digress. I just think that it's got to be, and Mike's not 100%. He wasn't 100% against Brooklyn, and you can tell that. You can see it, and so this is what it looks like right now. When coming down the stretch, Ant is your primary facilitator. Mm-hmm. Teams are taking away the ISO game, or the ISO game, the shot's not falling for him. When he's the primary manager.
He's, I tell you what, though, he's grown. This is his third year with the Wolves?
Yep. Fourth year. Year four.
When with all the things that I just explained that are going through his thought process as he's out there on the floor, and all the things that he's trying to capture, in a couple of years, whenever that clicks for him, whenever that moment happens where the game slows down for Anthony Edwards, it's a wrap.
When he can see the game, when he understands the game, with the ball in his hands on that level that Luka does, on that level that James, especially, peak James Harden. It's going. The hope is that he's not in a situation like a peak James Harden or even like a Luka, where because of what's left around him, he has to do all of that just for them to be competitive. Mm-hmm. The hope is that what they build around him is equivalent to what they have around him now, so that when he gets to that level, he's got guys around him that can flat out go. That's why I don't think, no matter how bad of a year he's having or how much he's struggling, I don't see a Jaden McDaniels trade. You got to keep that 23-year-old. That's the same part of his draft class, because he's also struggling. The kids have been struggling, and so the hope is that what they keep around him when he sees it on that level is equivalent to what they have now, and you're a legit contender with a legit, face of the league type player, and so I agree with you 100% on that. But right now, these 15-point fourth quarters, he should be scoring 15 points by himself in the fourth quarter. If not scoring 15 points by himself, he should be accounting for 15 points by himself, 10 points and 3 assists in the quarter, 10 points and 2 assists in the quarter. With turnovers.
Yeah, without the turnovers. And the reason, he doesn't move without the ball. Like he just stands there and does absolutely nothing. I watched the Lakers and the Golden State game, and now granted, Golden State is the best movement team in the NBA.
And LeBron is one of the best cutters in the NBA.
You said what?
And LeBron is also on the other side. LeBron is one of the best cutters in the NBA.
Right. And so it's watching them play, and then you watch the Wolves, and they just stag everybody, not just him. Nas Reed moves a little bit. Cat does not move. Rudy is in the paint. He's a good pick and roll. He does his. Rudy's been doing his job. You can't ask him to do nothing more.
Yep.
Jaden McDaniels just stands there. Everybody just stands there and watch Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns take Ant take 50 dribbles and Cat take 3, and they do the same thing over and over and over and over again.
And that's in part. That is in part that is roster construction. In part that is the fact that guys can't move too much because of Cat and Ant. They're going to move into their space. Jaden's job is to space into the corner. And there are some times, and Ant wants to get to the rack. So will Ant make the pass if Jaden cuts? Or will it just be another body in the paint clogging the way because Rudy's already there? And so that's in part, that is part of the problem with the roster construction is how do you create that movement when you have a player that is dribbling the hell out of the ball, but that player doesn't quite have the consistency of being able to manage the play, to create the play for the teammate that is stationary. The ball always comes out late, and it comes out late because it's a pass that has to be made after you've probed every opportunity for a shot, or it comes out late because there's too much lack of sense of urgency going up against the shot clock, getting into whatever the action is going to be in the first place. Those are the two primary reasons why the ball comes out late or why the shot that is taken ends up being a bad shot. And sense of urgency, now we can move on to the San Antonio game because I feel like we're talking about the same stuff because it is the same stuff that's problematic game after game. And the San Antonio game, which is the most recent one probably in people's minds, has so many examples in the fourth quarter of just a total lack of sense of urgency. And really all of these games, there's a lack of sense of urgency in the fourth quarter, and these other teams are picking up their pace of movement. They're picking up their intensity on the defensive end. They're picking up their intensity on the offensive end. They are picking up their cutting. They're picking up the pace in which they're getting into and flowing through their offense. And the Timberwolves keep doing this deliberate, lumbering, probing, over dribbling, not pushing the ball up into the offensive set with pace, even when they do run a play. And it's just creating so much bad offense. And yeah, some of that, you can say it's Finch on two levels. One, he's not getting through to these guys after the week that we've just witnessed. 4 games, clearly, whatever his message is about how to fix these things, they're not applying. And then 2, starting, I on one hand, I understand starting the fourth quarter with Kyle, Jordan McLaughlin, Shake Milton, Nas, and Rudy. What you say? What the hell is Chris Finch thinking? He's probably thinking with a 10-point lead, if we start this quarter with movement, because that should be a pretty good defensive lineup. So if we start offensively with movement and running good movement offense, we can get some things that maybe open up this lead before we have to put the guys that we know are going to stop the ball, because they've clearly been determined to stop the ball for the last however many weeks now back in the game. Unfortunately, what you got was a complete lack of sense of urgency and matching the moment. A bad Jordan McLaughlin turnover followed by a offensive foul on Rudy. You got an offensive foul on Rudy on the rebound. You had another offensive foul, I think, somewhere in there. You come out of a timeout. You put Cat back in the game to get more offense on the floor for Rudy. You come out of a timeout, and Jordan McLaughlin makes a ridiculously lazy pass to Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, just not a professional pass that leads to a turnover way out by the 3-point line. In my opinion, if you're going to start the fourth quarter with that unit, you've got to have a play in mind that you're going to run with that unit over and over and over and over and over again that's going to get the look that you want, that's going to control where the shot's going to come from and the look that you want, because you got a bunch of non-shooters on the floor in Naz Reid. You got a cutter and playmaker in Kyle, who's a non-shooter, a cutter and playmaker in Jordan McLaughlin, who's a non-shooter, Shake Milton, who don't even talk to me about what they're doing with him all of a sudden. And then Rudy Gobert, who you cannot give the ball to in a straight post-up. And then out of all of that, you didn't go to no Naz Reid straight post-ups. So what were you trying to accomplish? Because there wasn't any movement either. So I don't know what they were trying. There was no specific play call that I could see that they were going to execute time and time again. And to me, if you're going to have a bunch of non-shooters on the floor, you got to have a play that's designed to get a person a shot, and you run that play for 3 straight minutes until you make your first substitutions.
Yep.
And that doesn't happen, and that 10-point lead evaporated in about a minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah. So now we get to the end of the fourth quarter in that San Antonio game, and there's quite a few things that I know you want to touch on there, but my biggest thing is just this is, like I said 25 times, lack of maturity, that this team is falling short in that category. And like I said, they are a long ways away from the teams that they're going to have to compete with in the playoffs, who have done this, who have been there. They are a long ways away maturity-wise from thinking they're going to beat any of these teams, because the way they've been playing in the fourth quarter pretty much all year, besides when Mike Conley is on the floor, it helps. But they have also been relying on very big shots in big moments from Mike Conley, from Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and from their whole cast of crew, which is going to be necessary in those big games, that they are going to need to make timely shots. But their fourth quarter offense, like you said, kind of since the new year, has been horrible, and it's all due to the lack of maturity on this team.
And the lack of sense of urgency. And, I don't want to make excuses for them, but I'm starting to wonder if the intensity that they play defense with for, those first 30 games especially, is starting to catch up to them energy-wise. And I say that because Anthony Edwards has never played that intensity level of defense for that long in his life. Karl Anthony Towns has never played that intensity level of defense for that many games in a row in his life. Jaden McDaniels has not been consistent with his maturity, his basketball IQ, his decision-making all year. And really, I think more than anything, it's been the kids, Jaden and Ant, that have really had some horrible moments, in these fourth quarters. And you're absolutely right when you speak on the maturity of it. And to me, it's sense of urgency, and the fact that because they struggle offensively, one, I think it's in their heads. I think fourth quarters are in their heads. And a team comes out in them first couple minutes of the fourth quarter and they cut into that lead, and it becomes, here we go again. And now here comes the pressure and the tension and the stress and the tightness. And I think it's absolutely in their heads. The other part about that is I think other teams know this team, that you could be down 10, 12, 14 points going into the fourth. But if you put a little pressure on them, they're going to fold. They're going to start playing selfish. They're going to start playing individual. They're going to be careless with the ball. Their fourth quarter mojo, we can attack that. I think other teams, even the bad teams, absolutely know this team's going to fold if you can take them into the deep waters, like a boxer, like Mike Tyson was, knocking everybody out, until Buster Douglas took him into the deep waters. And Evander Holyfield took him into the deep waters and found out he couldn't swim when he gets tired, And so you look at the fourth quarter of the Spurs game, the 2:48 mark, for people who say Chris Finch needs to call more plays, Go back to the 2:48 mark. He calls a set play to get Anthony Edwards coming off of a curl handoff coming downhill. He has space. Rudy's rolling. He has options. And he decides to whip a pass back out to Jaden McDaniels on the wing. Jaden McDaniels is covered. Ant's got to know, if I have space, that means Jaden McDaniels is covered. And that's where I go back to that being able to play make and understanding the playmaking with Rudy Gobert. Understanding how to do something that he's never had to do in his life until last season when Rudy Gobert came to the Timberwolves. And we, as well talked about how he didn't like having the bigs in the paint and yada, 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 because they're just in his way. This is part of the learning curve for Ant. And the fact that he hasn't figured out how to use Rudy Gobert in a dominant way, whether it's the early pass, whether it's the lob, whether it's for his own pull-up game from 10-12, floater, the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander game, right? That pass was just a careless, lack of sense of urgency turnover. Then you got Cat's lazy pass. Just lazy. It was a lazy pass, the pass he made to Rudy. To try to make that bounce pass in traffic with a man trying to get back to Rudy, you might say I'm trying to make the right play by getting the ball to a rolling Rudy, but you got to make the right play in the right way if you're going to make the right play. And you can't throw a telegraphed, softy bounce pass when a team is working as hard as the Spurs were working. And that's what I mean by the lack of sense of urgency. I said it 2 weeks. I said it on my podcast. I said it on my solo episode last week. I think I said it 2 weeks ago. And you played for me. So I've said this for years. The first thing you have to do to win a basketball game is you have to play as hard or harder than your opponent. The second thing you have to do to win a basketball game is play as smart or smarter than your opponent. The Timberwolves' fourth quarter turnovers come from not doing both, not playing as hard and not playing as smart as their opponent. And that's why they're getting their ass kicked in the fourth quarters. And those passes, that play by Jordan McLaughlin, the turnover by Ant, the turnover by Cat, lazy and not sensing the urgency that you have to play with based off of the urgency your opponent is playing with. Then we go to the rebound that led to the game-winning free throws. When Jaden goes to help on the shot block, Cat goes to help on the shot block, Rudy is out on the perimeter guarding Wemby, and Ant just turns and watches the play and walks toward the paint as the shot is going up. No sense of urgency. Keldon Johnson went and got the rebound with urgency, but here's the thing. Anybody who doesn't understand what I'm saying, go back if you got the game recorded, go find the video of the end game, the play that led to the free throws. First and foremost, 5 guys got to go to the glass. 5 guys go to the defensive backboard. That is a rule in winning. We are trying to get our high schoolers to figure it out. We lost one game this year by not offensive rebounding. We almost lost Friday on an offensive rebound putback. We almost lost Saturday on an offensive rebound putback. It is a really difficult thing to get players to understand the sense of urgency with which they have to go defensive rebound, especially in the clutch. So I get it. But you're Anthony Edwards. You got to go get that rebound. That is your rebound. The play is moving away from you. Your job is to flow with the ball. When that shot was taken, you should have already had a foot in the paint. You never made it to the paint. And if you have a foot in the paint, when that ball comes off, you win the battle to that rebound because you're the most athletic player on the floor. Sense of urgency. Then we fast forward, the last play coming out of the timeout, 7 seconds left. You go into the backcourt to get the ball. Nobody from San Antonio follows you. You cross half court with 4 seconds left, under 5. It's like 4.5 seconds. So you catch the ball with like 7.3 in the backcourt, and it takes you 3 seconds with no defender in front of you to get the ball across half court into the front court. That is absolutely unacceptable. No sense of urgency. So then, of course, you're going to get blitzed and doubled because San Antonio's got Greg Popovich over there coaching him. They're not going to let you walk into a game-winning ISO shot. That man's got, 5 NBA championships as a coach over there? So now when you pass the ball to Cat out of the blitz, which is the right play, you pass it to him with 2.6 seconds left. You leave Cat with very few options. Rudy would have been open on the roll. Jaden McDaniels and Nikhil were wide open on the backside. Cat has no time to do any of that because you waste 3 seconds dribbling uncontested from the hash mark on the backcourt across half court. There is absolutely no reason for that. You have to rush into the front court and create that offense in the first second and a half to 2 seconds after you receive the ball for 2 reasons. One, if they blitz, now you pass the ball to Cat with 4 seconds or more on the clock. He's got all kinds of options. He can drive, he can skip pass, he can do all kinds of things. And then 2, it gives your team a chance, only down 1, that if a shot goes up, you can offensive rebound and get a tip in or a putback. You kill all opportunity for your team to win by sauntering lazily across half court with 7-point-something seconds left when you catch the ball to the point where your team only has 4 seconds by the time they actually get into the offense. That's just not acceptable. That is loser mentality. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it right here on the podcast. When you've never won at a high level, you don't play with a sense of urgency at winning time. That is not winning mentality. It's just not. You cannot do that to your team. You cannot. And it's selfish because you're assuming you're going to get the final shot off. That's the only reason you do that, because you don't want to have to pass.
Yep.
It's selfish. Late passing comes from making a pass when you have to instead of shooting when you can't find a shot. And it comes from lazily starting your offense against whatever the clock is. And how many, what did Chris Finch say at the end of the Boston game? We can't just keep dribbling out the clock. Here we are almost, 2.5, 3 weeks later, talking about Anthony Edwards dribbling out the clock.
Yep, I was just going to say, both things that happened against the Spurs are what happened against the Celtics. They gave up the offensive rebound, and then Anthony Edwards, with 11 seconds left on the clock, just walked the ball up the court down by 1, expecting to take the last shot.
And both times, it was a lack of sense of urgency by Ant. I get the kid's 22. I get he's got a lot to learn. But the Timberwolves' hopes are riding for this season. Rudy Gobert trade was made. Mike Conley was brought in. Cat is still here. You got 3 players on max contracts right now. All of this was done with the hopes that Anthony Edwards would be that guy right now. Draymond Green said it when the Rudy Gobert trade was made. He said the Rudy Gobert trade was the believe that Anthony Edwards is ready right now. What Anthony Edwards has been proving of late in these fourth quarters, especially without Mike Conley, is that he's not ready right now because he's not playing fourth quarters with a sense of urgency, except for the defensive possession on Mikal Bridges, which should have never came to that in the first damn place, or when he's trying to get a shot. Then there's urgency. And I say it again. We have a player that I coach that does a lot of the same things and can win you games. He won 2 of them for us this weekend. But we might not have been in those positions and he had some urgency when it comes to rebounding and defense in possessions prior to him needing to make hero shots or clutch free throws with 2 seconds left. And so that is the struggles of coaching our guy's a junior. Anthony Edwards is 22-year-old, 4th-year NBA player, a young, prodigious player. And I'm animated, boy. I'm heated about this. You can tell I don't get too loud this often on the podcast, but as a coach, you see it. I know Chris Finch sees it. The fans at this stage see it, and I know it's sacrilege to criticize Ant, but as a coach, you got to criticize everybody. And there's enough criticism to go around. Absolutely. Because we can talk about Jaden McDaniels' horrible decision to foul in the first place. And the fact that, again, he scores, 7 points, only gets 5 shots, 3 rebounds. And his activity level, it's often been said, is a barometer of how this team is playing. But Ant is the man. And you said it yourself. The fact that looks like there's starting to be some wavering in that trust in his leadership and being able to put the ball in his hands and him making the leadership in the right plays down the stretch of games. Just like you said, this team goes as Ant goes. And right now, Ant is struggling, especially in fourth quarters. And the team is struggling.
It's so funny to hear us say Anthony Edwards is struggling. He's averaging 33 points over the last 4 games and all. But that just tells you right then and there.
I don't care. We got to play.
I know.
33 points a game.
I agree with you.
We've struggled down the stretch of some games. Now, we got over the hump a couple times, but our 2 wins this weekend come on the heels of a loss in which we blew a big-time 18-point lead and totally crapped the bed down the stretch and lost by 5 at home. Yeah, we bounced back with 2 close 1-point wins.
I agree with you. Anthony Edwards is struggling. It's just funny to say that when someone is averaging 33 points, and yes, the fans, they see, he's averaging 33, the Wolves, da-da-da-da-da-da. That's the expectation level that we have for him, that, yeah, he can average 33 points, and we're going to tell you, because we're seeing past that he's struggling. And like you said, hopefully, by this point, even the average fan can see that in the fourth quarter, his 25 dribble turnovers absolutely kill the Timberwolves. Like, there's times where he actually has a drive to the lane and decides to do a pullback, step back, fadeaway elbow jumper. And I'm like, why are you making things harder on yourself? Everything you're doing is making things harder on yourself. Give the ball up, get it back. Stop trying to make 25 dribble, make someone fall, highlight real plays every single time you touch the ball.
The indecisiveness is affecting the flow of the game. It's affecting the flow of their fourth quarters. I'm gonna scale it back and simplify it like this: scorers score. That doesn't always equate to winning. That's a lesson Michael Jordan had to learn. How do I score and win? How do I stay within my identity as an elite level scorer and win? Took Phil Jackson to teach him, right? Yes, Ant's averaging 33 over this stretch or whatever. We know Anthony Edwards can score with the best of them. Mm-hmm. What he has not learned how to do yet is win with the best of them. And you say, well, the Timberwolves are 34 and whatever. Yes, but we've talked about it. Mike Conley has a big hand in that. Rudy Gobert has a big hand in that. Karl Anthony Towns has a big hand in that. But what you've also seen is when Anthony Edwards struggles, they have trouble beating or will lose to. When I say struggles, I mean struggles in his decision-making down the stretch, as has Cat at times. When those two are struggling with their decision-making down the stretch of games, you can lose to some of the worst teams in the league. And then their defense hasn't been good in the fourth quarters either. They're giving up a really high amount of points to, bottom-feeding teams on defense. So that hasn't been good either. They gave up 33 to the Spurs in the fourth quarter. They were outscored by the Nets. They only gave up 20, but they only scored 15, which is why that game was so close. They gave up 29 fourth quarter points to the Wizards. They gave up 36 fourth quarter points to the Hornets. Going back to the Thunder game, they gave up 28 fourth quarter points to the Thunder. So but part of it is you struggle on defense when you're struggling on offense. Sometimes your offense leads to your defensive struggles. When you're not scoring the basketball, the other team is always running off of turnovers or running off of misses. When you miss shots at the rim, it almost always leads to an open shot on the other end. So bad offense often leads to bad defense. And bad fourth quarter offense is leading to bad fourth quarter defense. So You know,
They got a chance. I mean, talking about glass half full, and I mentioned it a few podcasts ago. They put themselves in a position where if they lose some games, where if they, they had a 6-game lead between them and the sixth place team, and not those teams are not going to win every night either. So if you are on a stretch where you lose 5-6 games that you shouldn't be or unexpectedly slipping, you're still put yourself in a position to get through that and weather that storm and stay up 1, 2, 3 seed. Well, they're right there in that moment right here, right now, because they've dropped a few games over the past 2 weeks that they probably should have won. And now they're playing tomorrow night to see who's going to stay top the West. And one thing I will say that the Timberwolves have done in moments like these is recover. We talked about it with the Orlando game, and then going, I think, to Philly, it was the next night. I said, or was it Boston?
Yeah.
I said that I felt like the Timberwolves were going to take that one on the chin, that Anthony Edwards was going to come out with some fire, and they were going to take care of Orlando, which they did. And there's been a couple times where they've hit a little bit of a lull. Granted, this is definitely the biggest of lows they've hit yet. But when their backs are up against the wall, it seemed like they came together and found a way to come out that next night and get a W. So,
I was just going to say that all of a sudden becomes, there's more than half full water in the glass with a win tomorrow night.
Yeah, but a loss tomorrow night can really hurt this squad, especially if it's not a close game. Like if they somehow come out here in Orlando and OKC puts the smackdown on them, and then that reality sets in that, we really do have a lot to figure out here. That could be bad as well.
Well, I will say that if they're going to lose tomorrow, I think I would much rather them just get smacked down than to blow another double-digit fourth quarter lead, because that is seeping into their cycle. You could see it on their faces against San Antonio. You could see it coming, and they fought back and they pushed back, but they just can't get out of their own way. That's just what it amounts.
And San Antonio did make some ridiculous shots to end that game.
But that's what happens when you don't score and you allow a team to get that confidence. And then, like I said, the bottom line is Ant's got to do his job and go get that rebound. That's his rebound. You can't stand and watch in the fourth quarter. You cannot be a spectator on any play in the fourth quarter, especially in the last minute of a tie game. There's no play you can be a spectator on. There was no sense of urgency for him to go on and rebound, and there was no sense of urgency for him to get into whatever Finch drew up for the final play. I cannot forgive taking 3 seconds to get the ball across half court from the logo to the half court line with no defender pressing up on you with 7 seconds left. That's just that's even more inexcusable than being a spectator on the rebound. But I digress. We talked about that already. No point in going back and beating that dead horse. Hopefully, they have a sense of urgency for 48 minutes tomorrow night. Anthony Edwards needs one of those 35.12 rebound games where he's going to get every rebound and he's ripping and going, pulling down the board, pushing the ball up the floor. They need to play with pace and tempo. They need to get into their offense with pace and tempo, and they need to do it for 48 minutes. And that's what needs to happen, so that they can remember what it's like to play 48 minutes with that intensity they played for 48 minutes with way back when Boston came in the Target Center undefeated.
Yep, they're gonna need all of it. I will say that I don't feel as confident that that's going to happen this time around as I did with the Orlando game. But I, obviously hope that it does, and I hope that they come out playing together and find a way to come together. But right now, just the way that they've been playing and the aura around the team is I hope they find a way, because if they do, then that really is a testament to their, ability to stay together and to come together. But they're in a rough spot right now. They are in a tough spot.
Well, maybe the games against the good teams or the above average teams in the league will get them back refocused, because when we get together next Sunday, we'll be talking about Thunder, Mavericks, Magic. and neither one of those teams are walks in the park. I believe the Magic is getting healthy. The Mavericks have played some good basketball of late. Luka's doing Luka things. And then, the Thunder speak for themselves. So I don't see any point in doing concerning trends and hope it never ends, because right now everything is a concerning trend. And and so we'll come back next Sunday and talk about it and see what we got going on.
Yeah, let's just keep hope that it's the other way around, because we come back here Sunday and they trick these games off. The Wolves, it could go downhill really quick. Like this is a very young team with a lot of variables and a lot of guys that are capable of doing a lot of things, and that can be a lot to deal with at certain times, and it can go downhill really quick.
Well, I think this is when the veterans, I think this is when Mike Conley, Kyle Anderson, Rudy Gobert, this is when they earn their locker room checks, not just what they do on the floor, but this is where they earn their locker room leadership. This is where they earn we've been here before. We've played on high quality teams that have gone through rough patches in the season. Follow our lead. Let's go out here and get it done. This is when they have to help right the ship, and hey, there's water in the glass. Yeah, I don't care if you want to look at it half full or half. I know that a lot of this was a lot of negativity and frustration about what's not happening, but the reality is they're number 2 in the West right now, and there's water in the glass. And one win against Oklahoma City on the road tomorrow, follow that up with a home win against Dallas, and or even an undefeated homestand. You get one against Oklahoma City, and then you beat the Mavericks, Magic, and Rockets at home and get your home court back going again. And then you got, a 5-game road trip where that includes at Milwaukee and at the Clippers. So, if there's ever a time to put a little more water in the glass so that it's above half full and it's obvious to see again, this is a good time to start.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back next Sunday.
You've been tuned in to the Coach and the Culture podcast. I am Coach Frank. And as always, with my podcast partner, Lance Gardner, if you need your trees trimmed, service, it's probably been a good winter for it, in the sense that it's been cold enough to keep the parasites down, but warm enough to not be freezing your butt off out there working.
Yeah, it's been actually not very good, because the ground is not freezing and it's staying soft, and this mist and this dew is not making it very good for us to work. And so typically spring, summer, fall, we schedule some of these bigger, larger jobs that require snow and frozen ground to be this time of year. So when that's not the case, it really pushes things back, but we're still moving and shaking. We'll get through it.
Yeah, well, look here. Ownership has its privileges. All right, party people, thank you for tuning in. We will be back next Sunday covering the next 3 games. And if you got water in the glass, you live in a first world country, be blessed. Drink it up. Peace.
Peace.